Today, we're diving into Jean Starling's incredibly personal memoir, Fallen Leaves. Now, this is a story about surviving an almost unimaginable series of family tragedies. But it's really about the lifelong journey to find meaning, not in the loss itself, but in the legacy that loss leaves behind.
This quote right here, it's really the heart of the entire book. What Starling came to realize is that all the pain she had pushed down for decades, well, it didn't just go away. It was waiting, and it was demanding to be faced. This single idea really sets the stage for everything that follows.
Before we even get into the story, the book's dedication just stops you in your tracks. Take a look at the staggering scale of this family's story. 9 members of her immediate family gone. That's both her parents and 7 of her 8 siblings. And you start to see these recurring causes of death: diabetes, heart disease, and then you see the age of her father, Roman, just 33 years old. This isn't just a story, it's a testament to survival.
The author frames her whole story as a cascade of loss. It's this series of events that started when she was just a little girl and really shaped her entire life. And it's all built around this one single question that she carried with her for decades.
This is the question, this is what haunted her. Can you imagine, as a child, looking at the world around you and asking this? It becomes the central mystery of the memoir. How do you square that kind of immense suffering with faith? How do you find any sense of purpose when it feels like everything is being taken from you? This is the question that drove her whole search for answers.
So the story begins with that first and maybe the most pivotal loss, the death of her father, Roman Starling, when Jean was only 3. His death wasn't just a tragedy. For years, it was a complete mystery that hung over the family.
To really get what happened, you have to remember this was the 1950s. After having a mental breakdown, Jean's father was subjected to what she calls medical experimentation. He was treated with something called insulin coma therapy, a super high-risk psychiatric treatment where they would literally put patients into comas using massive doses of insulin. It's a dangerous and thankfully now obsolete procedure that ultimately cost him his life.
The chaos that just swallowed this family it's overwhelming. In 1953, her father has his breakdown, and for months he endures this experimental treatment. Then in March of 1954, he dies, just suddenly. And then, and this is just unbelievable, while his body is lying in a coffin in their living room, the family's tobacco barn, their entire livelihood, burns to the ground. It's just an unimaginable sequence of events.
Losing a parent is so much more than just an emotional loss. For the Starling family, it meant they lost their protector. And what came next was a whole new chapter of suffering, where the family's vulnerability was just cruelly exploited.
This quote from Jean's sister Ruth is just chilling. It's such a powerful metaphor. The wolves she's talking about, they were relatives, uncles specifically, who took advantage of the family's desperation. They preyed on the children, adding this whole other layer of trauma that would stay with them forever. And the fallout from all this was just devastating and so far-reaching. The family was thrown into crushing poverty, forced onto welfare, and had to face all this social shame. The children had to endure molestation from the very people who should have been protecting them. And the weight of all of it, it just became so heavy that Jean herself had a mental breakdown when she was just 6 years old.
So you can imagine, she was just desperate to escape this world of pain and poverty. She did the only thing she thought she could do to get out. She got married at 14 years old. But what she found out pretty quickly was that she hadn't escaped at all.
She essentially traded the poverty and fear of her childhood for the financial control and verbal abuse of an alcoholic husband. That lack of safety she felt at home was just replaced by the total instability of his addiction. She had simply traded one hell for another, caught in this cycle of trauma she didn't even understand yet.
And this cycle went on for 18 long years. 18 years of verbal abuse, of being blamed for her husband's drinking, of feeling completely smothered and invisible. It was this long, painful chapter that really set the stage for a midlife reckoning that would finally force her to face everything from her past.
Okay, so all of this trauma, all of this pain, it all built up to the climax of her story. Decades later, in midlife, the dam of all that repressed grief finally just broke. And this period of intense crisis, it didn't lead to her destruction. Instead, it led to this profound discovery that would completely reframe her entire life.
This is how Jean describes that feeling, as decades of buried pain just came rushing to the surface. The grief she carried for her lost family, she said it felt like a 20-pound bag of potatoes that was finally
finally crushing her. She had no choice but to face everything she had run from her whole life.
Her moment of clarity, her epiphany, it came in the most surprisingly simple place, her garden. As she was kneeling down, pulling dead flowers to make way for the next season's growth, it just hit her. Death wasn't just an end. It was a necessary act to make room for new life. Her family hadn't just disappeared. They had made room. And in that one moment, she finally understood. Their lives were the message.
This was such a profound shift in her perspective. The legacy of her family wasn't their suffering. It wasn't their diseases. It was the messages they left behind. It was her father's dedication, her mother's unbelievable strength, her siblings' courage and love, and their unwavering faith. Their legacy was in how they lived.
This realization becomes her mantra. It's this powerful declaration that completely transforms her from a victim of circumstance into a carrier of a legacy. She wasn't just a survivor of tragedy anymore. She was living proof of her family's resilience.
And this is the beautiful, cathartic conclusion. Their collective story of overcoming these impossible odds, of holding on to faith, of loving fiercely, that is the entire message. Their purpose wasn't to avoid pain. It was to create a legacy of survival and hope for everyone who came after them.
And in the end, Fallen Leaves turns this deeply personal revelation into a universal question for all of us. It asks us to look at our own lives, our own struggles, and our own survival, and to really think about the legacy we're building day by day. So the question for you is, what is the message that you are leaving behind?